2 months ago, I opened the drawer where I kept my engagement ring, the one my late fiancé Everett had saved for years to design with me. It was gone. My mother was sipping coffee when she casually said, "Oh, that? We sold it." My sister Calista needed time to find herself in Bali. They sold a $590,000 ring like it was household clutter. No warning, no remorse, just silence and a legal envelope left on my pillow. But what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was what I'd do next. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Friday mornings had a way of holding their breath around here. Denver was just beginning to thaw, soft rays of sun slipping past the blinds, casting pale gold across the dresser I hadn't polished in months. I sat on the edge of my bed with one sock on, brushing off the quiet tension I'd felt all week. It was Everett's anniversary. 2 years to the day. 2 years since the world folded in on itself. I didn't cry anymore. Not like I did that first spring. Grief had softened its voice. Still there, still sharp. But it now lived in the silences, in the in-betweens. I reached into the second drawer of my nightstand where the velvet box always rested. Always. It was muscle memory by now. Same angle, same soft click when the wood slid open, except there was no box. I blinked, then opened the drawer wider, checking the back, lifting the tissues, a few receipts, and a half-used candle I never threw away. No box, no ring. Something in me already knew it wasn't a mistake. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with a strange, stinging cold. I walked down the stairs, still wearing just one sock, my hand gripping the banister a little too tight. Mom was at the kitchen counter, flipping through a magazine like it was any other Friday. She sipped her coffee, not even looking up. "Morning," she said. "Mom," I asked, forcing calm into my voice. "Do you know where my ring is?" She turned a page. "What ring?" I clenched my jaw. "The ring. Everett's ring. The one he gave me." "Oh," she said, blinking slowly like I'd asked about expired milk. "That? We sold it." The silence that followed was suffocating. "You what?" She stirred her coffee, glanced toward the window. Calista needed help for her Bali retreat. Spiritual stuff. "You weren't wearing the ring anymore anyway." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "It wasn't just a ring." My father's voice drifted from the hallway. "You haven't touched it in months, Rowena. We figured you didn't need it anymore." I turned, and there he was, arms folded. That same tired condescension in his eyes, like I'd once again failed to meet expectations I never agreed to. I stared at them both, every word I wanted to say getting stuck somewhere between my ribs and my throat. "You sold something that wasn't yours," I said. Dad shrugged. "Well, technically, no," I cut in, my voice firmer. "That ring was mine. Everett designed it with me. We chose the diamond together. He had the band engraved inside." Mom rolled her eyes. "Rowena, it's not like you're still getting married." She said it like a joke, like Everett had just stepped out, not collapsed in the parking lot of a diner where he'd been waiting for me, not left a voicemail saying he was bringing my favorite pie. "He's dead. Not forgotten." I snapped. "But my..." Voice cracked on the last word. Mom sighed with that exhausted look she wore whenever emotions were deemed too much. "Calista's finding herself. That retreat is life-changing." "Then maybe she should have sold something of hers," I said, almost whispering. "She doesn't have anything like that," Dad muttered. "And you weren't using it." I stepped back, the world tilting slightly. They hadn't just sold a ring. They'd sold the last piece of him I had left. I turned and walked back up the stairs, every step louder than it needed to be. When I reached my room, I opened the drawer again. Same empty space. Only this time, I noticed something I'd missed in the haze. Folded in the back, tucked gently like it didn't matter anymore. The velvet cloth, deep navy, embroidered with white, daisies, now limp without the weight it once cradled. I sat on the floor beside the drawer. The cloth rested in my lap. My fingers touched the stitches, every one familiar. Everett said the daisies reminded him of our first road trip, when they bloomed wild across the field behind that dusty motel in Utah. I stayed there a while, listening to nothing, feeling too much. Out the window, the sky had turned pale blue, clouds moving in slow formation. The world kept spinning, but something inside me had stopped. My voice came before I realized I was speaking, low and steady. They didn't just sell a ring. They sold what's left of me. I sat there for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. Just me, that empty drawer, and the daisy-stitched velvet cloth that used to hold the only thing that proved he ever asked me to be his wife. By Sunday night, I hadn't left my room once. I hadn't eaten much either. Just water, stale crackers, and whatever silence would let me keep down. I hadn't even turned on my phone since Friday morning. I was scared of it. Scared of texts from Mom asking me to be more understanding, or worse, from Calista pretending not to know what had happened. But eventually I turned it on. Not because I was ready, but because I was tired of hiding. The screen lit up, and the first thing I saw made my stomach twist. There she was, Calista, on a glossy wooden yoga deck somewhere in Ubud. Sunlight behind her, a garland of flowers around her neck, arms lifted in that rehearsed surrender to the universe pose she'd been practicing since she was 16 and bored in Sunday school. The caption read, "Healing is expensive, but so worth it. Grateful to my amazing family for believing in my journey." A heart emoji. A lotus. The comments were flooding in. "You inspire me. Such a brave soul. This is how healing looks. She's glowing like actual light." I stared at the screen until my hand began to tremble. I couldn't even cry. That was the part that scared me. It was like the grief had nowhere left to go. She was using his ring money to post about her rebirth. I scrolled further, and it kept getting worse. She was tagged in stories, reposted by yoga brands, even featured in a wellness blog. From pain to power, Calista Blai's transformational journey. There was a paragraph about overcoming generational dysfunction, another about how she chose the hard path of self-love. I nearly laughed. I wasn't mentioned once, not a single line. No one knew that while she was stretching into the sunset, I had been sleeping on the floor of my childhood bedroom because my parents gave away the bed I bought after Everett died, said it was too big for one person. I kept scrolling, but my mind was already pulling me back. Flashes of growing up with Calista. The tantrums, the slammed doors, the way Mom would sigh and turn to me and say, "You're the strong one, Rowena. Help me keep the peace." That was the job I never applied for but never got to quit. Everett used to say, "You don't always have to be the one holding the house together while it burns." But apparently, I didn't hold it well enough, because now they were dancing in the flames, and I was the ashes. Around 8:30, I finally dressed and drove out to the cemetery. The wind had picked up. The gate creaked as I pushed through. I walked, the narrow path between graves, carrying nothing but my phone and that crushed feeling in my chest that hadn't eased since Friday. When I reached Everett's stone, I didn't kneel. I just stood there. "They used your ring, Everett," I whispered. "They sold it so she could post gratitude quotes in Bali." The wind rustled the dried leaves at my feet, and I could have sworn something in me cracked just a little more. Back home, I sat on the floor again, scrolling. Her latest post had nearly 2,000 likes. A drone shot over rice fields. She was mid-spin, arms outstretched. Caption: "Sometimes you have to leave the noise to find your soul." I didn't think. I typed before. The shame could catch up. Hope the healing was worth it. I paid for it. I hit send. The comment disappeared into the sea of praise. 10 minutes later, it was gone. Deleted. At 10:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, let your sister have this moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they called it. Not erasure, not betrayal. Drama. Didn't reply. I just stared at the screen and reread that message until the words blurred. Then I scrolled up to see Callista's face again. People think grief is loud, wailing, sobbing, storming out. But it's not. It's being erased slowly while the world claps for the person holding the eraser. I wasn't trying to start drama. I just didn't want to disappear again. But apparently, in this family, even the act of existing outside their script counted as rebellion. 3 days had passed since that comment vanished from Callista's post. Just like me, apparently. I sat at the kitchen table mid-morning, same one I'd eaten cereal at since I was 7. A small folder lay in front of me, neat, closed, everything inside stacked precisely, partial receipts for the ring. Everett's old, email confirming the appraisal, a note from his parents written in grief-soaked cursive, thanking me for caring for the ring until it becomes part of your new chapter together. I pushed it across the table toward my father. He didn't even touch. "You keep going like this," he said without lifting his eyes from the Denver Post, "and you'll ruin your own peace. We can't undo what's done." I watched him stir his coffee like it was the only thing that mattered. "But you can at least acknowledge what it was," I said, trying not to shake. He sighed, folded the paper, and finally looked at me. "Rowena, you've been living here, rent-free. We've given you more than enough. It's just a ring." Then he slid something across the table, a thin white envelope with a gold-embossed letterhead. The moment I saw the law firm's name, my stomach flipped. I opened it slowly. Inside was a formal note. "This correspondence confirms that all contents within the property at our address fall under legal ownership of Vera and Jean Blay." I stopped reading. They didn't just want the ring. They wanted me to know that nothing here belonged to me. Later that day, the sky outside hung heavy and gray, the kind of color that makes your bones ache. I drifted into the garage, not knowing why. Maybe I needed to breathe air that hadn't passed through their mouths. I sat on a crate labeled Rowena College and opened it, brushing off a film of dust. Inside were yearbooks, an old guitar strap, and beneath it, a sealed envelope. My name, on the front. Everett's handwriting, careful and unmistakable. I'd never opened this. My hands shook a little. Inside was just a sticky note, faded, but intact. "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't just a note. It was a gut punch from someone who always saw me, even when I didn't know I was vanishing. I slipped it into my wallet, folded behind my driver's license, behind the version of me the world could see. That night, dinner was predictable. Meatloaf, green beans, and erasure served hot. Mom raised, a glass midway through the meal. Here's to Callista. Her growth, her healing, her courage. What a transformation. I sat still. No one looked my way. Not even a passing glance to check if the other daughter was breathing. I lifted my glass halfway, then lowered it and stood. "I'll be upstairs," I said. My dad muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "That girl needs perspective." I didn't answer. I walked to my room and pulled out the plastic storage bin from beneath the bed. Bills, receipts, copies of insurance forms, email printouts, statements from my joint account with Everett. Things I hadn't looked at in a year. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something that wasn't theirs. Something that reminded me I used to have a life, a love, and a voice. The scanner beeped quietly as I fed in page after page. I created folders. I labeled timelines. Somewhere along the way, I stopped crying, stopped asking for acknowledgement. Something inside shifted from wanting to be heard to refusing to be silenced. They'd taken the ring, but they hadn't taken the truth. Not yet. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I needed something that was mine. By Thursday night, the pile of documents on my desk had doubled. Receipts, bank transfers, insurance forms, each one scanned, labeled, and stored into a high folder marked truth. There was no master plan, no legal motion drafted, just me pulling string after string together before someone else yanked them from my hands. Rain tapped against the windows, soft but steady, the kind that blurred everything. Outside just enough to match how things felt inside me. I sat at my laptop, highlighting a paragraph from Everett's old email when I accidentally brushed the trackpad. An old browser tab opened, one I must have left bookmarked a year ago. It was a podcast. Autoplay kicked in, and then I heard her voice. Healing begins. When we decide to release the roles other people force us into. Callista. I froze. I didn't move. My hand hovered midair, caught between closing the window and needing to hear every word. The host's voice chimed in. That's so powerful, Callista. Can you give us an example of that release? There was a pause, a sip of something, and then I had to separate myself from the grief in our family. Some people, they cling to pain like it's a personality. Every muscle in my body locked. I couldn't even blink. She was talking about me. I listened on. I walked away. It cost me so much, but I chose joy. I gave up everything, even objects tied to trauma. You can't move forward while dragging symbols of emotional debt. I mean, rings. They're just objects soaked in pain. I don't remember hitting pause. I just remember staring at the screen, my reflection in the dark monitor staring back at me, like it didn't recognize me anymore. 50,000 listens. 50,000 people heard my story twisted out of shape and sold back as her brand. She'd turned Everett's ring into a metaphor for toxicity. My grief, our love, reduced to clickbait. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I just sat there. My fingers hovered, then moved slowly. I downloaded the episode, saved it into the folder. Then I opened a new document and titled it, Timeline of Misuse. That night, the file grew steadily, my breath the only sound in the room aside from the soft hum of rain and betrayal. Around 10 Maon, I grabbed my coat and keys. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I just needed to scan a few things. Everett's. Letters mostly, and the local coffee shop had a scanner and late hours. I drove in silence, the windshield wipers setting a slow rhythm. At the coffee shop, the barista didn't ask questions. I ordered a black tea and found a corner near the back. One by one, I slid his letters into the machine, his handwriting growing shakier in the later ones. Each scan made the truth heavier, not lighter. I love how you see people, one line read, even when they've forgotten how to see you. I pressed my hand over that page. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to be rewritten. By the time I returned, home, it was close to midnight. I changed into an old sweatshirt, pulled my hair into a low knot, and sat cross-legged on the floor near my desk. In the drawer beside me, folded carefully, still clean after all these years, was the velvet cloth. The one with the white daisies embroidered in its corners, the one that once held the ring. I took the USB drive where I'd saved the podcast and wrapped it in the cloth. Some things you wrap not to protect, but to remember. I placed it gently in my purse, zipped the top, and let it sit there like an anchor. I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't breaking anymore. I was collecting. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally remembering I'd been right. Friday evening settled over the house, like a wet coat, heavy, damp, unwelcome. The gray light outside hadn't shifted for hours. Inside, silence pressed in from every wall. My parents had gone out for dinner, leaving behind the faint scent of my mother's lavender perfume in a Tupperware container of meatloaf I hadn't touched. I stayed upstairs, door half cracked, laptop shut. My body ached from sitting too long, but I couldn't bring myself to lie down. I needed something, anything, that could remind me this house hadn't always felt like a prison. So I went digging. There was an old bin in the back of my closet, the kind with brittle plastic edges that cracked if you pressed too hard. It held what was left of a girl I barely remembered. CDs labeled in Sharpie, birthday cards from elementary school, faded Polaroids, from when I still had baby teeth and knees constantly scraped, and a stack of mini DV tapes. I hadn't seen those in years. I plugged the little camcorder into the wall and flipped through the tape drawer, choosing one marked Row 6th Bidet. The screen lit up, static buzzed, then color, muted and jittery but clear enough. There I was, a little girl in a yellow sundress, standing beside a chocolate-frosted cake with 6 lit candles. My smile was wide. I remember that dress. I'd begged Mom for it, said it made me feel like sunshine. Then Callista appeared on screen, 8 years old and already taller. Without warning, she shoved my head into the cake. I flinched, both in the tape and on the floor. The camera shook with laughter. My parents' voices joined in. "Callista," my mother said, laughing more than scolding. Little me wiped frosting from my eyelashes. I looked around for help, but no one moved. The clip ended. I paused the video. My hand gripped the edge of the desk. I sat still for a long moment, tasting that same bitter silence I must have swallowed that day. I whispered to the room, to no one. Maybe this is just how it's always going to be. The key turned in the front door downstairs. I heard heels on, tile, the clink of keys in the bowl, then the low murmur of my mother's voice, probably saying goodnight to my father before heading to bed. But instead of going to her room, she came upstairs. Light footsteps outside my door, then a knock. Before I could answer, she pushed the door open. No warning, no permission. She stood there, holding a small velvet box, navy blue, aged at the corners. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I was cleaning. "Out the closet," she said softly. "Found these. Nana had promised them to you, remember? Figured maybe now's a good time." She sat on the edge of my bed without asking. "Open the box." Inside, a pair of pearl drop earrings, delicate and familiar. I blinked, unsure what game we were playing. "She didn't mean to hurt you, sweetie," Vera said, smoothing her skirt. "Callista just handles things differently, and we thought you'd moved on from all that. All that, like grief was a shoebox to be tucked under a bed and forgotten." The earrings gleamed in the low light, clean and cold. I almost reached for them. I almost let the warmth of nostalgia dull the sharpness inside me. I almost said thank you. I almost forgave her. But then a buzz. My phone lit up on the desk. A message from Leanna, a friend from college. "Thought you should see this." I tapped the link. It was an Instagram story. Callista again, sitting cross-legged on a patio somewhere tropical, probably Bali. A pale smoothie in hand. Perfect lighting softening her every word. Her voice syrup-sweet. Forgiveness is so powerful. Even when people lash out, I know it's just their pain talking. I rise above. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. That was about me. About the deleted comment, the velvet cloth, the ring, the earrings. Every inch of my restraint being used as ammunition against me, repackaged as her saint-like patience. The wave of humiliation hit fast, like a slap I should have seen coming. Vera left not long after, telling me to try and get some rest. I said, "Nothing," just nodded. The door clicked shut behind her. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed. The house returned to quiet, but something in me wasn't quiet anymore. I opened my laptop. The folder marked Truth waited like an open mouth. I added the screenshot of Callista's story. Then I retrieved the inheritance letter from Nana, the one that listed my name in her careful cursive right beside the word earrings. I scanned it. Then, slowly, I opened my phone's recorder. I spoke into the dark. "I'm not doing this to expose them. I'm doing this so I never forget again who they really are." And then I wrapped the earrings in a separate cloth and slid them into the drawer. Not to use, not to wear, just to remember. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern I'd been trained to forgive. But that morning, something shifted. I woke up before the sun had climbed fully over the rooftops. The house was still blanketed in that muffled quiet only clouded mornings bring. I didn't wait for coffee, didn't scroll. I opened my closet, found the navy blazer I hadn't touched since Everett's memorial, and slipped it over a clean button-down. The sleeves were slightly looser now, but it still fit. Standing in the mirror, I didn't look like someone who had anything to prove, just someone who was finished waiting. The velvet cloth sat on my nightstand, folded carefully around the flash drive. Inside it, receipts, scanned letters, a copy of Nana's will, the podcast audio, screenshots of Callista's posts, and my voice recording. I placed the whole thing inside a clear envelope, slid it into a folio, and zipped it shut. I didn't leave. A note. Didn't text anyone. I walked out the front door like I was heading to a dentist appointment. No tension, no fire, just clean air and purpose. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a co-working space tucked between a dog, groomer, and a yoga studio. The front desk manager, a soft-spoken guy in his 20s named Ethan, handed me the key card without much small talk. I appreciated that. I took a corner table by the window. Light rain tapped against the glass. My laptop hummed as I opened the legal document templates Everett's estate lawyers had once shared with me. Just in case. I filled in the blanks with cold clarity. Item 1. 4.1 carat ring purchased jointly with Everett 3 months before his passing. Statement. Property held in trust until marriage. Therefore, sole ownership defaulted to surviving. Party. Me. I cross-referenced every entry with dated email threads, photo timestamps, and the notarized letter Everett's mother had sent, confirming the family's intent for me to keep the ring. I added an affidavit describing the events around the sale and the psychological harm caused. At exactly 10:42 a.m., I clicked send. The documents went to Pfizer and Ellis LLP, the firm that handled Everett's affairs. I addressed them to Samantha, Mira, a partner I remembered for her matter-of-fact warmth. Then I sat back. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just still. I didn't cry, didn't shake. I closed my laptop and leaned into the back of the chair, letting the sound of the rain blur the edges of the moment. Across from me sat a ceramic cup of untouched coffee. I finally lifted it to my lips. It had gone cold, but it was mine. Later, that afternoon, I stayed in the space. The team renting the room next to mine was rehearsing for a nonprofit event. Their laughter seeped through the walls. One of them stepped out to take a call. She smiled at me. I nodded back. I opened another folder. This one had nothing to do with my family, at least not directly. It was for the Reclaiming What Was Always Yours initiative, an annual women's leadership gala I'd been quietly funding in Everett's memory since last fall. He'd always said, "Legacy didn't need a name, just a ripple." A light switched on in the dark for someone else. The event would be held next week at the Meadowbrook Center, an upscale venue just outside the city. The floral arrangements, speaker stipends, even the customized signage had all been paid for under a foundation name I'd created discreetly after his death. I double-checked the PowerPoint slides. One of them was a photo from years ago. Everett and I volunteering at a career panel for single mothers. I remembered how he'd stayed an hour after, just to help a woman figure out how to fix her resume. That slide would close the night, just above it in small print. In honor of those who give quietly. I sent the final slide deck to the event coordinator. As I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "You got mail. Looks like a gala invite. Calista got one too. I think they want her to speak. How wonderful." I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I laughed, just once. Soft, dry, like the punchline of a joke only I got. I didn't RSVP, didn't respond at all. I didn't need to be on the stage. I'd already built the microphone. Let them walk into the spotlight. They didn't know who lit it. I arrived just before sunset. The hotel's event space shimmered with soft candlelight and glass bowls filled with floating white daisies. I spotted them the moment I stepped inside. My own touch. Vera would have chosen roses, red or nothing. But this night wasn't hers to curate. I checked in quietly at the front desk. No name tags, no fuss, just a light touch on my elbow from the coordinator as she handed me a folded program. She didn't recognize me. That was perfect. Across the room, I saw Calista glide through the main doors in a white gown that looked custom. Her hair was pinned up in deliberate waves. Vera walked beside her, arm in arm, whispering praise like she was coaching a pageant queen. "You deserve this, darling," she said, just loud enough for anyone near the champagne table to overhear. I stood alone in the corner for a while. Not hidden, just unbothered. My black dress was simple. No sparkle, no statement, just presence. My clutch was tucked close against my ribs, velvet cloth folded neatly inside, pressing against the envelope I hadn't let out of my sight all week. The music softened, and the room shifted. The host stepped onto the small stage to welcome the guests. A few polite claps followed. Dinner plates were cleared, wine refilled. The tempo of the evening had begun. Then the surprise guest speaker was announced. Calista took the microphone with practiced poise. Even her footsteps sounded rehearsed. I could almost hear Vera inhale like a proud director behind the curtain. "Grief," Calista began, "is a journey, but some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off." My fingers tensed around the edges of my clutch. She continued, "Tonight, I want to talk about letting go, about choosing not to be defined by what hurt you, but by what you did with the pain." She never once said my name, but I was in every sentence. A shadow standing behind her words. "I had to release things that tied me to darkness," she said, smiling with soft grief. "Objects, expectations, even family wounds. I chose light." The audience nodded. A few murmured, like they were at a sermon. I moved slowly toward the event coordinator at the edge of the room. Her headset was perched over one ear, and she was checking the screen cue. "Excuse me," I said quietly, offering the sealed envelope. "This is a featured donor message. It needs to be played now, before the final speaker." She blinked, uncertain. I wasn't told. It was requested ahead. Check the card inside." She opened it, read a few lines, her brow furrowed, then lifted. "Yes, okay. I'll cue it up." I returned to my corner. Calista was still on stage, thanking the organizers, the city, the brave women here tonight who've overcome so much. The applause began before she even finished, and then it stopped. The house lights dimmed slightly. The screen behind the stage flickered to black. White text faded in memory of Everett Langford Blay. A hush fell. The video opened on me, sitting in a quiet room, speaking directly into the lens. "My name is Rowena Blay. I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered, and I lost it." I watched from the back as heads turned. some recognized me for the first time. 2 years ago, I buried my fiancé. We had picked out a ring together, a symbol of our future. It was taken, sold. No, money was used for someone else's journey without my knowledge. That ring didn't just represent a promise. It held grief, memory, and love. The screen shifted to a photo. Everett smiling, me beside him holding his hand. I funded this gala quietly in his name. The theme, reclaiming what was always yours, wasn't just about leadership. It was about memory and truth. There was no anger in my voice, only clarity. Sometimes, I said in the final frame, the ones who suffer most are expected to stay silent so the loudest can heal. The screen faded to black. The room didn't exhale. It simply froze. Vera's hand flew to her mouth like she'd been slapped. Callista, still standing near the stage, had frozen mid-pose. A photographer's flash went off, catching her face twisted between confusion and fear. I didn't wait to hear what was said. As I walked to the door, I heard a whisper behind me. She paid for this? Then another. That was her fiancé. I didn't look back. Didn't pause for applause. I stepped into the night air, letting the cold remind me I wasn't invisible. I just wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't need applause. I needed them to hear the truth in a room that couldn't look away. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet when I could already feel it pulsing on the nightstand, like it was warning me. I rolled over and stared at the screen. 38 unread messages, 12 missed calls, notifications stacked on every app like digital ash from a fire I'd quietly lit. I opened Instagram. Callista's face filled the first story tile. She was crying, dramatically, artfully. I was ambushed. Her voice cracked. Last night should have been a celebration of healing, not an attack. My sister took something beautiful and turned it into a vendetta. Slide. She's weaponizing grief. Read a caption beneath a clip of her dabbing her eyes with a tissue, perfectly manicured fingers shaking. Another clip. Her face turned slightly away from the camera, like she wasn't aware it was still recording. I tried so hard to include her, but sometimes family can be your worst enemy. Comments flooded in. Wow, this is so sad. She needs to get help. Your sister sounds toxic. By the time I opened Twitter, 2 local blogs had picked up her version. Resilience coach faces family sabotage at women's gala. It was all so fast and so calculated. A text came through from Vera. You've broken this family apart. Are you happy now? Followed by a missed call from my father. No message, just a digital silence that said enough. I blocked them both. Then came a message from Ethan. He'd known Everett, known me long before I got used to swallowing my voice. Don't let them own the final word. You've come too far to be pushed back into the dark. That was enough to get me out of bed. I threw on jeans and a plain navy sweater. No makeup, no earrings, just the velvet cloth folded neatly into my jacket pocket, and a transcript I printed that morning. A kind of truth I didn't need to shout, but wasn't going to hide either. The drive to the family house was short. I knew the turns by muscle memory, even though the place hadn't felt like home in years. The front door was cracked open, like it had expected me. Callista was pacing in the living room, hair up in a knot, phone clutched in one hand. Her voice came in, strained rehearsals, as if she were practicing damage control out loud. Something about emotional abuse. Something about my journey. She froze when she saw me. You shouldn't be here, she snapped, voice tight, but her hands trembled. I won't be long, I said, stepping inside, calm. I walked to the coffee table and sat down the transcript. The paper sat heavy despite how thin it was. Her eyes darted to it. What's that? I didn't answer. I just gently unfolded the velvet cloth. Empty now, just a soft square of memory. I placed it beneath the transcript. "It's your voice," I said. "From the podcast, the one where you called me a grief addict." Callista's face drained of color. "You don't understand how media works. I understand how truth works." She stared at me, lips slightly parted, but nothing came out. I stood there for a second longer, letting the silence hold. Then I turned. Vera stepped into the hallway just as I reached the door. Her eyes were wide like she'd just woken up to a reality she didn't choose. "We're family, Rowena," she said, a faint tremble in her voice. "Blood?" I stopped, not out of hesitation but clarity. "Blood means nothing without respect. I'm not here to belong anymore," I said. "I'm here to break the cycle." She didn't respond, just stood there like she couldn't find the script. I walked past her without flinching, out into the cool air. The sky had started to clear slightly, just enough to let in a thin band of light, the kind of light you have to look for. I slipped the velvet cloth back into my pocket. It felt different now. Clean. Done. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I finally loved myself more. The morning light in Napa was different. Softer somehow, less accusatory. It didn't pierce. It warmed. A breeze rolled gently off the vineyards as I turned the key in the lock of my new studio door. The sign above the entrance caught the light just enough to shimmer. Langford and Blay, crafted with memory. I stepped inside and flipped the lights on. The space wasn't large, but it felt expansive in a way the Blay family house never had. Wood floors, brass fixtures, a row of workstations facing wide windows that framed the hills like an oil painting. The walls were painted a gentle cream, and my tools were lined in silent order. Pliers, molds, flame torch, tumblers. I hadn't realized how much I missed the smell of metal warming under heat. It was something between hope and finality. That first week, foot traffic came in steady. A young couple from San Francisco wandered in looking for wedding bands with soul. A woman in her 70s asked if I could set a locket into a ring so she could carry her husband's photo, not just memory. Then there were the quiet ones, locals who didn't say much. Only looked around and then whispered, "You're the one from the gala, right?" I'd nod, smile, nothing more. On one shelf in the back corner, under a soft spotlight, was a glass case. Inside, folded perfectly in half, was a familiar velvet cloth. Framed beneath it was a handwritten note. "This piece is not for sale. It cost everything to make." Beneath the cloth rested a band, diamond and steel seamless in its fusion. Etched along the edge, one delicate daisy. Not ornamental, not flashy, just quiet and certain. One afternoon, a little girl wandered in with her parents. She pressed her nose to the glass and pointed. "Who made that one?" she asked. I crouched down beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "Someone who used to be silent," I said. She turned to me, brows scrunched. "Are they better now?" I smiled, real and soft. "She's still learning, but she's not silent anymore." Weeks passed without a word from Vera or Callista. No calls, no texts, but that was its own answer. Then one Saturday, I received a short message from an old family friend named Lorraine. I hadn't spoken to her since college. "Saw your tribute at the gala. Your mom never said anything, but she kept the video on her desktop." I read the message twice, then I let it sit. I didn't reply, didn't forward it to anyone, just let it be. Sometimes an apology doesn't come with words, but it doesn't mean you wait your life to hear it. I walked over to the workbench and slid open the top drawer. Inside was the original receipt for the velvet box, yellowed from age. I placed it beside Everett's final note, the one that had lived in my wallet ever since. Don't let them take your voice or your worth. Outside, the clouds had lifted. Sun spilled across the cobblestones. I walked out front, breathed in, and turned the sign to open. As the day went on, I melted silver, set stones, sketched a new line of pendants, but there was no rush, no frantic energy, just motion. Quiet. Mine. In the background, an old folk song, played on the stereo, low and grainy. I didn't know the lyrics, but the melody felt familiar, like something I'd heard before I was old enough to name it. I looked again at the cloth under the glass. It had once held a symbol of a future that never arrived. Now it held nothing. And that, in its own way, meant everything. I lost something that was supposed to last forever. Then I lost people who were never meant to leave. But in all that loss, I found something quieter and stronger, myself, and this time, no one gets to sell it.